Okay, let's start with a really wild idea. What if the reality we all agree on isn't actually real? What if it's more like a kind of social hypnosis? Today, we're going to dive into a pretty unique framework from our source material that says it has a way to snap out of it. It's all about figuring out how to tell what's verifiably true from what might just be, well, a massive group delusion.
All right, so here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll look at this idea of two realities, basically fighting for control. Then we'll get into what the source calls the red circle of belief. That's the problem. And then we'll look at the solution, the blue circle of proof, and this really interesting structure called the line. After that, we'll see how it all works in practice and get to the really big claim, the difference between having true sight and just being delusional. So everything we're about to talk about really hinges on this one big provocative question. The source material basically looks you in the eye and asks, is our everyday common sense reality just a man-made delusion? Like a spell that we've all kind of fallen under without even realizing it? So to really get a handle on this social hypnosis idea, the source says that all of humanity is basically stuck in a tug of war between two different realities. You've got one reality that's man-made, it's manipulated, it's all built on belief and distortion. And then on the other side, you have this objective, verifiable reality, something you can actually measure against to see what's what.
All right, let's start by digging into the problem. The framework gives it a name, the red circle. And the core idea here is that this is a reality built completely 100% on belief. And this is where we get the core visual metaphor for this whole thing. It's so important. You see these two clocks or circles. The red one, it's broken. It represents that flawed, incomplete reality we were just talking about. But the blue one, it's whole, it's complete. And that represents a verifiable reality. This image is going to be our guide, so definitely keep it in your head as we go.
Okay, so here's the bottom line. The red circle is all about being broken, right? It's a system full of distortion and these false loops that just go round and round, and the only thing holding it all together is belief. But the blue circle, that's the opposite. It's whole, it's verifiable, and it's presented as the thing that can actually break you out of those loops. So how do you know if you're in the red circle? Well, the source actually points to specific things people say. Phrases like, who cares? Or when someone dismisses an idea just by saying, oh, that's based on belief. According to this framework, those aren't just innocent comments. Nope, they're seen as the actual tools that keep this whole broken system running.
Okay, so if we're all potentially stuck in this red circle, how the heck do we get out? The author says there's a way. It's a path to the blue circle, to that verifiable reality. And it's through this very specific structure they call the line. And here it is. This is the key. The line is the solution we've been talking about. And as you can see, it's presented as this really specific narrative structure. It's got a clear beginning, a middle, and an end. And the claim is, this is the key, this is what unlocks objective reality. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because the line isn't just some abstract philosophical idea. No, it's presented as a very concrete, historical, and theological story. It all kicks off in Genesis, where this fundamental dilemma is first introduced. Then that dilemma gets sharpened and crystallized through the story of Jesus. And finally, the whole thing is solved, or so the claim goes, in the book of Revelation. Okay, so that's the theory, right? The red circle, the blue circle, the line. But what does this actually look like in the real world? Well, the source gives us a couple of great examples to show the difference between these two ways of thinking in action. So case study number 1 comes from a pretty famous podcast interview. We have Richard Dawkins, and he gets asked if Jesus actually existed as a historical figure. His answer? Who cares? Now, for the author of this framework, that's it. That's a textbook example of someone thinking from inside that flawed red circle. But why is that a red circle response? Well, according to the source, that answer, who cares, it just completely misses the target. It's a way of shutting down the conversation, of avoiding having to deal with the actual structure of the line. By putting personal opinion or, belief ahead of the verifiable narrative, it just keeps the whole discussion stuck in that blind red circle. The second example takes us way back in history, to Galileo. You know the story. He builds his telescope, and he's got direct visual evidence for his claims. He invites the church leaders to just look, but they refused. And their reason?
They said the telescope was just creating optical illusions.
And here's the connection the source makes. That excuse, it's just an optical illusion, is basically the exact same move as saying it's just based on belief. They both function like a magic wand to wave away inconvenient facts. They're dismissals that are rooted in a belief system, and their whole purpose is to shut down any evidence that might challenge the way you already see the world. So let's put these side by side and you can really see the pattern. On the red circle side, you've got arguments that are all about dismissal. Who cares? It's an optical illusion. They just stop the conversation cold. But look at the blue circle side. These are invitations to actually check the evidence. Christ's claim to bring judgment is basically saying, test my claims against this structure. And Galileo's, look for yourselves. I mean, it doesn't get more direct than that. It's a call to observe reality.
So, where does all this leave us? We've seen how these two different ways of arguing work. And now we get to the ultimate stake here, the big claim of this entire framework. And it really just boils down to a choice, a fundamental choice, between living in a delusion or gaining what the author calls true sight. In this is probably the most audacious claim in the whole thing. The author argues that this framework, the line, is constructed so perfectly that delusions simply cannot be used as an explanation for the author's own role within it. It's a bold move, right?
The core concept here is called structural placement. And here's the logic. Look, anyone can make a simple false claim, right? Like I could just say, I am Napoleon. Easy. But the argument goes, it's a completely different thing to invent an entire, complex, verifiable system like the line, and then correctly place yourself in a logical position inside that system. The claim is that you could only do that if the entire narrative, the whole structure, was actually true to begin with. So what's the big payoff? What do you get for adopting this framework? According to the author, you get instant sight. And that's described as this incredible ability to just immediately see the difference between what's real and what's just part of that social hypnosis. And importantly, this is pitched as an observable, verifiable skill, not just another belief to add to the pile. And that's where the source material leaves us, with this really profound, kind of mind-bending question. Is it actually possible to build a structure, a narrative, that is so perfectly and logically put together that it becomes its own proof? A framework so solid that it makes calling its creator delusional impossible. That's the challenge and the question that this whole idea puts on the table for you to think about.